Welcome to my four-part series in digital pattern drafting. My name is Alyssa Ritter, and I am a professional costume designer for theater and digital media. In each of these episodes, I will demonstrate a different approach to drafting patterns in Clo3D. In this video, I will introduce you to the layout of Clo3D and show you how to trace a basic vintage t-shirt pattern. Let's get started. Before we get started, I want to go ahead and review or introduce you to the interface for Clo3D. So let's start over here, and this is our file menu, and most of these icons along the side you can find also up here. For right now, let's just go to settings, and let's go to user settings, and I just want to make sure that we're all using the same kind of settings here. So go to user interface, and you want to make sure your unit system is inch, and then go to view controls and use regular mouse. Mine is set to Maya because that's who I am, but I recommend using regular mouse instead. Once that's selected, go ahead and do close. And then one more thing you want to change is under preferences, gizmo, and then you want to make sure world coordinate is checked. And that's just going to make sure that your workspace is as efficient as possible. All right, so looking at the interface, we have the library history, modular configurator on the side. All of these are tools that will be used in the 3D window, which is right here. All of these are tools that we used in the 2D window, which is right here. Some of them overlap, some of them don't. Just wherever you find it handy to find things, that's what works best for you. All these icons have to do with how things are viewed or interpreted in the 3D window, and then same here for the 2D window. Over here is our object browser. This is where, depending on what you're looking at, you're going to find all the different types of objects that are in the scene. And then down here is the property editor. Depending on what you've clicked, all of the information on that appears down here. So since I clicked on the fabric, here's all the information I have for that fabric. If I clicked on this button, then all of the information on default button is going to appear down here. Right there it is. All right, so uh, let's start over here in the library, and let's go to Avatar and Female V2. Double click that, and let's find Grace and double click her. If your window doesn't look like this, then it might be because this just needs to be toggled. This little icon right here. Sometimes it's easier to read this way, sometimes it's easier to read this way, but if you have items that aren't downloaded yet, you can only see them in icon view, so just be aware of that. So this is just a default avatar size. This is Grace. She's very nice, but we want to give her a more specific size than what she comes with. So if you double click the size folder, you can see there's all of these different ASTM standardized sizes. And let's go to Petite Curvy and Petite Curvy 8. And now she has donned all of these new measurements. If you want to see what those are, you can always go to Avatar Editor, and see all the measurements that are being used to create the shape here. And you can even customize them as well, which is really cool. All right, let's get back out of this folder and let's see what else is in the library. If you double click the folder that has the two dots on it, it'll take you to the previous folder. Okay, let's see what's going on. We got some hair. Let's give her the bob, and let's go back and shoes. Let's give her some flats. All right, she is ready to go. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close out of this library to give myself some more space. You can do that by clicking on this arrow at the top, and then we just are looking at our 3D window and our 2D window. So to navigate the 3D window, if you have the regular mouse settings, to pan, you're going to just use the middle button, click and hold, and that makes you go left to right. If you want to zoom, then you just use the scroll wheel. And if you want to rotate, you actually right click and hold, and that's how you rotate in the 3D space. And then in the 2D space, it's actually very much the same. You right click to you don't you right click. You middle click to pan, and then you use the scroll wheel to zoom. There is no right click to rotate because it's 2D. All right, you can also use the number keys on the keyboard to check all of these different little views here, which is convenient. So 3D window, 2D window. 2D windows, we're going to do our pattern drafting. So let's go ahead and load in our reference image. To do that, you're going to right click in the 2D window anywhere. And in this window, you're going to go down to Format 2D Background. Click that. This window pops up. And you're going to click on the tiniest little folder icon that's really easy to miss. Click that and then navigate in your computer to find the files that are included in the link in the description. So this is the folder that's included. The file we want to use right now is QuickSew 1984. So I'm going to double click that, and it's going to load it in the background here. We want to leave the scale at 100%, but that's definitely going to change if you're tracing patterns based on how big the file size is. While this window is open, you can move it, but as soon as you close it, you can't move this image anymore, so just be aware of that. I'm going to go ahead and put it here so it's kind of out of the way. And then opacity, you can also leave at 50%. It's nice to have it a little bit translucent so that you can work around it. And then go ahead and click OK. Now that our workspace is set up, we can go ahead and start tracing this pattern. The first thing we want to do is go to our polygon tool. The hotkey for this is H on the keyboard. You can also find it right over here, polygon. If you don't see it, you might need to left click and hold on that icon and then navigate until you find the polygon tool. So this is how we're going to trace the outside of our patterns. And to do this, we're just going to left click all the corners of the pattern. Don't worry about the curves at this beginning stage. Just click the four corners of the pattern. When you're done, click the first point that you started with, and we'll leave it like that. If your pattern doesn't look like mine, you need to turn on translucent surface, or so it's up here in the 2D window. It probably has monochrome surface, but I find that translucent surface is the most easiest to work with. If you put points in a weird spot and you want to move them, you can use the Z tool, I call it, but it's the edit pattern tool. The hotkey is Z. And with that tool, you can grab any one of these points and you can move it into where you actually want it to be. If you want more points, you can right click and you can click split, and that'll add a point just anywhere, and then you can move that point. And if you want to delete a point, you can click on that point and just press delete. So go ahead and do that with both of these patterns. Let's go back to the first tool that we used, which was the polygon tool. I just used the H hotkey. And while you're working, you might try holding shift, which will create right angles on your pattern, which helps keep everything really nice and clean. Just go ahead and get all of those corners. The less points you have, the better the cleaner your workspace will be. So you'll notice as we're creating patterns over in the 2D window, they're appearing in the 3D window. That is the huge benefit of this program. That's what's so cool about it. All right. So let's add some curves in. What we'll need to do is use the C hotkey and pull up the Edit Curvature tool. You can also just get it by clicking on the Edit Pattern, scrolling down, Edit Curvature. But the more you can learn to use hotkeys, the faster your work will be. And you can just grab these lines and drag them to create the curves that you want. If you're finding that you can't achieve the curve that you need just in one pull, what you can do is go back to the Z tool, the edit pattern tool, and you'll notice that when you click on a line that has a curve, these little blue handles show up. They're called Bezier handles, and you can adjust those and create like S curves or any kind of curve that you want. And then you can also use them to just make sure that your corners are squared and angled and everything is trued. Like especially at center back here, I want to adjust that, or else I'll have a weird point. All right, so we've got our front and our back patterns traced. How exciting. We are ready to try to unfold these and see what they look like on the avatar. So I'm going to go ahead and move my back out of the way. And on my front pattern, I'm going to go to the Z Edit Pattern tool. I'm going to right click on this center front line, and I'm going to go down to Unfold Symmetric Editing with Sewing. So this is basically like when you cut something on the fold, except that it also magically sews it symmetrically too. So you only have to sew one side, and if you edit one side, it's going to edit the other side equally. So it saves a lot of time. Again, we're going to do that with the back. So with the Z tool selected, the Edit Pattern tool, right click this center back line and unfold symmetric editing with sewing. There we go. So now in our 3D window, we can move these around. But the easiest way to dress the avatar is to actually use the hotkey Shift F, and that makes all of these what are called arrangement points appear. So all you have to do is click your pattern and then hover over the arrangement point that best corresponds with it. So if it's a sleeve, it's over here. If it's pant leg, it's over here. And then click that dot, and then it'll automatically place it. Same with the back. Go ahead and click that dot, and that really speeds up time a lot because it can be really difficult to move things around in the 3D space if you're not used to it. Once they're in place, we get to sew them. So to sew the sewing tool, there's a whole bunch of different ones. They're over here. There's segment sewing N, there's MN segment sewing, and then there's even more sewing options down here. But we just need the basic sewing, the N. You'll notice they're also over here. So with this sewing, all we have to do is click, like for example, on the shoulder seam, and then click on the corresponding shoulder seam, and then they will sew. Oh, go ahead, click, 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 and then they will sew together. And because it is symmetric, it sewed both shoulder seams. You can also do it in the 2D window, which I actually find is a lot easier. Just note that it gives you a little notch to show you what direction you're sewing, and so if you click up here on this pattern but click down here on this pattern, it'll cross the sewing, and that will create utter and absolute chaos. So if that happens, you can either undo and re-sew, or you can use the Edit Sewing tool, which is up here. The hotkey is B, and then you can right-click that seam and go reverse sewing like that, and then it'll sew perfectly fine. All right, now that everything's sewn and in place, we can go ahead and use the space bar to press Simulate. And there we have it, the very beginnings to our cute vintage t-shirt. All right, now we can repeat the same steps with the sleeve. You can choose to do a long sleeve or a short sleeve. Either will work for this tutorial. I'm going to go ahead and go back to that use that H hotkey to go to the polygon tool. And I'm just going to start going along my way. I will add, even though there's not a corner here, I am going to add a point to the top of the sleeve because I am going to need to if I'm going to create all of these S curves. And then again, if you hold shift, it'll lock it to either 45, 180, etc. And that's very helpful because a lot of patterns do require that kind of precision. So now that that's traced, I'm going to go to the curve tool or the edit curvature tool or the C hotkey, and I'm just going to drag out any curve. I'm not going to be able to achieve an S curve right away, so I'm going to need to go to my use the Z hotkey to make the Bezier handles appear, and then I can just drag them into place. What's nice about this top one is I really want these Bezier handles to be pretty much like opposite of each other, or else I get some sort of chonky, like weird point in the top of my sleeve. So one way I can accomplish that is by using either Option on a Mac or Alt on the PC, and holding that down while I click, I can control both of the Bezier handles at the same time. That'll give me a nice even curve. Alright, so now that my sleeve exists, I can sew it to my garment. And I think this sleeve goes to this side, so I'm just going to click that, do Shift F to make my arrangement points appear, click on the arrangement points, and now it's appearing there. Now it's really easy to go to N, segment sewing tool, and just click sew, and click sew, and then on the I'm going to want to sew this side seam too, so click sew and go ahead and simulate. And there's the sleeve. It's very cute. The nice thing is for sleeves is once you have one in position, because they can be kind of tricky, all you have to do is go to the transform pattern tool, the A hotkey, click the sleeve and do Command or Control D, and then you are basically duplicating that sleeve with symmetric editing and sewing. Just like when we unfolded this one, we can just have two patterns that both have the same sewing, so it just will put it right into place. And when I simulate it, there we go. So there's my sleeve. How cute. So this pattern has a neckline, as I guess we can see it. There she is. It's got a little neckband and it's got a little cuff. Both are very cute. But you know, rather than just tracing these, I'm going to go ahead and draft one from scratch because it's actually, I think, easier to do it that way. So to draft the neckline, I need to know how long the neckline is. And so what I can do is use the Z hotkey to go to the Edit Pattern tool, and I can click on the back neckline, holding Shift, click on the front neckline, and following my cursor, it will look like it'll add them up automatically. Okay, there we go. It was being a little glitchy for a moment. All right, it'll add them up automatically, and on my cursor it says 8.180, and that gives me that length of half the neckline. So I can go ahead and make half the collar that fits into it. So the hotkey for the pattern drafting, for drafting a rectangle is S. If you're doing an odd shape, the polygon tool is helpful. Rectangle, if you're just making a rectangle, just use the rectangles tool. And that tool's nice because I can click anywhere in the 2D window and I can say, I want an 8-inch wide rectangle and I want my color to be an inch high. And then it'll just pop up right here. And there's half of my collar. To get the other half, I'm going to decide where center front is, and I'm going to unfold symmetric editing with sewing. Yay! Okay, so now how do I sew this to there? Because this is one piece, but the shirt is in two pieces. Well, I have to use I like to use the MN free sewing tool. There's no hotkey for it, but it's right here. And what I do is I figure out, okay, I want this to be center front, so I'm going to start at center back and work my way towards center front. So click to center back, click center front, and now I'm going to press enter saying that's all the pieces that are on that side. Now I'm going to go to my pattern and I'm going to start at the center back, click, and then I'm going to stop at the shoulder seam because I don't want to keep going. I just want to stop there, click, and then I'm going to start at the shoulder seam on the front, click, and then go to the center front. And once I have all of the things I want on this side sewn, then I go ahead and press enter, and it'll sew all of this to all of that. And since they were both symmetrical patterns, they both will work. Now at this point, I could just simulate and let this thing fly into place, but it might disrupt some other things. So instead, I'm going to right click it, and then I'm going to say superimpose side, and it's going to figure out where it's supposed to be sewn to and just jump right there. And now when I simulate, it just is like right in place, and it's so nice. Alright, and then I can go ahead and sew this center back together, and we are good to go. Alright, so we're going to do something similar with the cuffs that we did with the neckband, except instead of using a measurement of the sleeve, we want it to fit the measurement of the wrist. So we're going to use um, let's see, the basic circumference measure tool, and I found that over here. Yours might just be already accessible, but there's two tape measures, and it's this one, basic circumference measure. Once that's selected, You can click anywhere, like I want the cuff to be here, so you just have to click twice to give it a direction to go. And once you click twice, just move your mouse and then it'll show you how it's going in circumference around the avatar. If it looks good, go ahead and click, and then you have a little measurement that stays there, 6.781 inches. So let's make our cuffs 7 inches long. And then hers are really cute. I'll make them maybe 7 by 2.5 or 3. Um, and then that means we're just going to go back to this rectangle tool. Click on anywhere in the 2D window. Width is 7. Height is 2.5. And click OK. And this one, we're not going to unfold it because we just want the symmetric pattern to be the one on the other sleeve. But all we have to do is go N to sew and click both of those seams and click right click, superimpose side, and oh, there we go. How's that looking? Oh, you went underneath there. I just gotta fudge it a little bit. And then go ahead and sew that side seam. And there's that cuff. Very cute. I'm just going to click that with the A tools selected and Control or Command duplicate. Go ahead and put that underneath that sleeve and simulate. And there we go. Now I have 2 cuffs. So right now the fabric that the computer thinks that we're using is just this basic default simulation fabric, which is really no fabric. It's maybe like I don't know, like a stretchy muslin. It doesn't really exist. It's just an easy way for the computer to like simulate while you're working. But if you want to be specific about the fabric that you're using, and I think you probably do, go click on in the object browser, click Fabric 1, and all of these fabrics are made out of Fabric 1 right now. You can always add more fabrics so that you can have different fabrics for different pieces, but right now the default is they're all made out of Fabric 1. And then you're going to scroll all the way down to the bottom. Don't get fooled by this that says type, fabric type. Just keep going and go to physical property. Right now it's the basic preset, but if you click this little down arrow, all of these different fabric properties are options. So let's go ahead and click knit cotton jersey, and then when we simulate, we'll see that the fabric has now taken on the qualities of cotton jersey, which is really, really cool. Um, if the nice thing is that the computer understands how the amount of stress or stretch each fabric will take, and it takes that into account when you use the fit map. So these are the garment fit maps. There's the stress map, the strain map, the pressure point map, but the one that is most useful is fit map, and the hotkey for that is Alt 8. And it's actually not showing me any issues right now. But if I pull on it, you can see it's saying that is the extent that the jersey will do. If I choose a different fabric, the fit map will say different things. So if I do a nylon canvas, it says, yeah, no, these cuffs are too tight for nylon canvas. Do not do it. So we're like, great, well that's fine because it's a little top. So we're gonna go back to that knit cotton jersey, and it says, yeah, that'll work. That's fine. And now that you kind of have this up, you can edit your fit to make sure that it works with it, and knowing like when you've overfit. So I might lengthen this little top a little bit. So if I go to the edit pattern tool, which is Z, I can click this line and then shift click this line, and then I can just drag them down and then lengthen the pattern as much as I want to lengthen it, which is really fun. And then what else can I do? I can one thing, oh, I was thinking I want to make this neckband a little bit smaller because it's gaping. So when it has the jersey, I think it just needs to be a little bit smaller. Yeah, that's looking good. And the thing is with Clo3D is that this is the most like low res version of this garment. If you really want to check the fit, you can go up to simulation, this little arrow, and choose fitting accurate fabric, and it's going to increase the definition that you're using to a higher level. So let's see, high res garment settings is particle distance 10, so that's pretty high. So it's it's really going to show the more definition in the fabric. But it doesn't want to simulate at this level because, oh, there it is. Yeah, so that looks really good. You can see how those folds are draping. Yeah, that looks really nice. Um, but you can't actually work with it at that high level because it's just a computer. It's doing the best it can. So just use it to check what it actually looks like and then go back to normal. And watch when I simulate normal, a lot of that a lot of that definition just kind of goes away. So, well, I guess it kind of stayed out here. All right, but it won't go back. All right. One thing that you can do at this point is when you're happy with the fit, you can check the seams for truing. So go back to this Edit Sewing tool, or the B hotkey, and you can see that when I like click or when I hover over the seam, it's telling me the difference. So that one is pretty true actually. The shoulder seam, however, is 0.288 difference, but the front is actually wider than the back. So I don't really want that. I'm going to drag that out to make that a little bit better, and then go check that again. Yeah, that's much closer. It's still not quite on. So what I can do to be more precise is, using the edit pattern tool, drag out, and then right click. I can type in whatever number I want, so 0.1, and then that will make it much more efficient to getting a precise measurement. But those are my only really two seams that aren't cuffs, so it looks like my my blouse, my top um, is fitted and trued, which is really exciting. Okay, so now I'm ready to print this pattern and make it in real life. Usually this takes longer, so if it's taking you longer, just know that I've done this tutorial like a ton of times. That's why that's not taking so long. So it'll take you much longer. Be kind to yourself. Um, so if you get to a point where you're happy with your blouse or your top, we're going to add some seam allowances. This is obviously optional depending on if you prefer to use seam allowances, or to or to use the seam line on your pattern. But if you want to add seam allowance, like if you're using a projector, for example, it's this button right here, seam allowance, and you just select everything and you type in the property editor how much seam allowance you want, so 0.5, and then it adds it. So it just offsets it right there. You can choose if you want for like a longer hem. You can choose 1 inch there. And that'll change there. Yeah, so you have a lot of control over the seam allowance there. So that's nice. And the nice thing I will say about adding seam allowance, even if you're not going to print it with seam allowance, maybe you'll delete it later, is that it'll help you figure out your yardage. So what I mean is up here it says simulation. If you click this button, then go to print layout. Um, and here it gives you a representation of what your fabric is, and here's all your pattern pieces. They're just like in a stack. If you click your fabric and then scroll down to, let's see, the width, you can pick the width of your fabric. So your fabric is maybe 58 inches. It'll change it here. Now that says the fabric's 58 inches. You're like, great. All you gotta do is press this nest patterns button, little play button, and it says, all right, there you go. You need just over a yard. So hopefully whoever's working at Joann's is nice to you and gives you just slightly more than a yard. But it's calculating it all with those those seam allowances. Once you've done that, you can go to simulation, and you're basically ready to export this pattern. You just got to select it, just with the A tool selected, go to File, and export. And you want to export as an Adobe PDF. And then you can just save it as whatever you want. And it'll be a PDF file, which you can then later use to create either a projector pattern, or you can tile it, or you can bring it to a printer to have them print it for you and just use the paper that way. So yeah, that's the introduction to Clo 3D. In this four-part series, I'm going to cover a few different methods. This is the tracing method, which honestly I love to use a lot because there's so many of these vintage patterns that are available online, and I can just trace them and play around, and it's very, very fast and easy. But if you don't think that way or you want a more precise method, then I'm going to cover three other methods in this series. So check out the other tutorials for more information.